Why the hell do you need reserved signs for your ceremony? Well, luckily you've clicked on this video and I'm going to tell you everything. I'm literally going to give you the who, what, where, when, why. This video is going to cover who needs them, what they are, where you need them, when you need them, and why you need them, but also how to make them. But I'm going to do it all in my own order. So the very first question is, what are reserved signs? So in your ceremony at your wedding, it is a non-negotiable to have reserved signs on the chairs or pews. This means that when certain guests arrive, basically you're reserving a seat for them. Yes, groomsmen are supposed to have the role of ushering people to be sat down in certain seats. However, if they don't get that right, you could very much end up with bridesmaids sat all over the place, dad at the back, mother of the groom somewhere else. It's just carnage. So I definitely recommend having reserved signs for the key people, like the most important ones, so that if your groomsmen were utterly useless, those people would still have somewhere to sit. I would then say that doesn't leave them with no role. It just means that they can then help usher all the rest of the guests. They can make sure that people are sat on the ends of the aisle so that your ceremony looks full. They can make sure if you want like your side and your partner's side, they can do that. They can greet people, they can give out orders of service. There's so many jobs that they can be doing. But all we want to know when we go to sleep the night before our wedding is that in the morning, people are going to be sat in the right seats at the ceremony. Reserve signs, to give you an idea, are basically a piece of paper that says something along the lines of, this seat is reserved for, and then you place that on the seat where you want them sat, when you need them. You obviously need them in the ceremony, but what you need to do is make sure that they are set up before any guests arrive. So if you are getting married at a venue, you can ask your coordinator or the venue, groomsmen, anybody who's going to be there before guests to set those out. If you're in a church, quite often you can leave them when you do your rehearsal, but up to you. Or you can again have the groomsmen arrive slightly earlier to be able to put those signs out. It is very important to make a reserved sign plan, almost like a table plan, of who is sitting where. And make sure it's very clear that here's the front, here's the rows, so that they know that this side is the left if you're looking at the space that you're getting married. I've slightly leaned into the where, but where you need the reserve signs is quite important. So you need to know before you do anything, how many chairs or how many people can sit in your ceremony in those spaces. Some ceremony rooms will only have 4 chairs on each side, some will have 6, some will have 2, some will have pews, which could technically sit like 10. If you're in a church, it's a little bit easier because you can kind of dictate if you don't want the whole left-hand side to be sat and the whole right-hand side to be sat. You want people to be sitting in this core middle part of a church. This means then you can just work out how many people can sit in a pew, and then you can put the reserve signs for those. If you're in a venue or somewhere that then has chairs, knowing how many chairs is very important. Can you take out a few chairs from the front row? If it fit 5, but you only wanted 4, do you have enough depth of the room to be able to add more rows and less chairs? The best tip for this is to speak to the venue to say, what's the max capacity of that room? What layout options do I have? Once you know how many chairs and how many seats you can have in those areas, you can then start to figure out how many people can sit there and therefore who needs to sit there. Which brings us nicely onto who. Right. The very minimum that you need for those reserved seats is anybody walking down that aisle. I will tell you why in a minute. But I would also consider key family members like mums, dads, step-parents, grandparents, siblings, groomsmen. Anybody that you think they should be sitting near the front of the ceremony should have a reserve sign. You also need to think about anyone who will be getting up during the ceremony. So witnesses or people doing readings. The last thing you want is for the person doing a reading to have to kind of wiggle out and push past all the people on their aisle to be able to get out to come and do the reading. Not a vibe. So I would start by thinking about both sides of the family. Who do you need? Write yourself a list of the key people that you think they need to be sat here, near the front where they can see us. But as I said, bare minimum people walking down that aisle. So I'm going to slightly jump to the why to give you a hint at this and go back to these. So the reason that we are doing anyone that walks down the aisle is because I would like you to picture this. Close your eyes if you must. It is the ceremony. The music is playing. You are stood at the back ready to walk down the aisle. Everybody is happy. Everyone's standing. They can't wait to see you. Your bridesmaids enter. They walk all the way down the aisle and then there's nowhere to sit. So they have to turn around and then walk back up the aisle. And then the next bridesmaid's coming down and then they're like, oh my God. And it's like one of those runway things and they don't know where to sit and there's nowhere for them to sit. So they end up standing at the back for the whole of the ceremony. No, we don't do that. Maybe your dad's walking down the aisle. You get to the front of the aisle, you go and he goes to sit down and there's nowhere for him to sit. And he has to then go over to this side past Uncle Dave, who has a front row seat, and sit behind. This is why they are literally non-negotiable. You have to have a very seamless go and sit down, because it will ruin the ceremony? It will ruin the ceremony. Back to who. This then helps you figure out why they need someone to sit and who will need someone to sit. So if you've got flower girls walking down the aisle, where are they gonna go? Do they need their parents nearby? Therefore, do the parents need reserve signs? The list starts to get bigger when you think about it. To give you some context of my wedding, I had parents, step-parents, bridesmaids, groomsmen, nan, people doing readings. So my ceremony looked like this. So my venue could fit more than 4, but I had 4 chairs either side of the ceremony. On the groom side, which is if I'm looking at you guys getting married, is on the right, typically, I had mother of the groom, stepfather of the groom, best man. Now I decided to only have 3 chairs there because there wasn't another person who would make sense being there. And I didn't want to then start splitting up couples or put somebody random there. So I got rid of a chair. On the left-hand side, my side, I had my dad, who walked me down the aisle and therefore sat straight at the front, first chair. I had my daughter, I had my bridesmaid and another bridesmaid. On the second row, and therefore behind her, I had my other bridesmaid's husband, who is the father of the flower girl. So when the bridesmaid and flower girl walked down the aisle, they walked all the way down, round to the front. She sat on the end of the front row and passed her daughter, the flower girl, to her husband, who was sat behind. Next to them, I then had my stepmom and nan. On the right-hand side, I then wanted to be fair. This is where it then gets difficult, because I would never have my mum and stepmom on different levels of importance. So I made sure they were on the same row, but with a big aisle in the middle. So on the right-hand side, I then had my mum, my stepdad, and then 2 spare chairs for whoever then wanted to sit there. This is all my key people. These are the nearest and dearest. I then have siblings on both sides, but that was where I said to the best man, look, just make sure they're sat somewhere nearer the front. I then had on the 3rd row on the aisle, a person that was doing a reading. Remember, all aisle seats are easy for people to get out. So the 2 people doing readings was somebody on this aisle seat here, and my daughter, who was one of the bridesmaids, sat on the front row. Easy to get out. Ours was a non-legal ceremony, and therefore we didn't need witnesses, but if we did need witnesses, I would make sure that they were either in reserved signs already, because typically they're parents or bridesmaids, because typically they're mums or bridesmaids or bridal party. If not, I would also make sure that they are on aisle seats. Other people that you might want to be considerate of and do reserve signs for might be people that have got children, and therefore you want them to be sat at the back. Easy exit if their kids start making noise. If you know, you know. You can use a reserve sign for anybody that you think they need to be sitting there. Obviously, it's difficult to then not go into the realms of giving every single person that arrives a reserved sign, but just be conscious of how many you actually need sat there, and can the rest of them would be nice to be sat there. For example, the siblings, it's nice that they sat near the front. That is a groomsman, usher, anybody, coordinator's job to make sure that they're sat nearer the front. They don't need the reserve sign. I'm giving you a where part 2, because now you need to be conscious of where those reserved signs are gonna be. So I slightly touched on this, as well as having mum and stepmum in the same level of importance, but you also will need to think about bridesmaids. Order of your aisle, therefore who walks down the aisle in what order, will be dictated by where their seats are. So if you have a row of bridesmaids, you will need whoever's going first to be furthest to the left, because they will walk down the aisle and then into their seats. The next one will come in and next to them, and so forth. So typically it's good to put the maid of honor last, because it means that they'll be on the end of an aisle. Now remember, bridesmaids can be on both sides. They can have some on the front row, some on the second row. You can put them wherever you want. You need them near the front so they don't have to do the awkward shuffle back down the aisle, but they can split, they can go some in the front row, some behind, however it's gonna fit. It's very unlikely that you're gonna look at your reserve signs list for the first time and go, this is perfect, they all fit wonderfully. It doesn't happen. It's like a table plan. It involves a bit of, oh, okay, well if I put them there, then their partner's here, whatever. Another little trend or tip that's going around at the moment is figuring out which side you want the families to be. Some people are choosing to swap the couple so that you can see your family and that they can see their family, or swapping the families so that when you're stood up facing each other, behind them is all of your nearest and dearest. Totally up to you. You can do it if you want, you can not do it if you want. That's a you question. Again, if you do, it doesn't matter. The reserve signs are there. That will help them figure out where they're sitting. Another big tip that I can give you for reserve signs is make sure you put names. Reserved doesn't do it anymore. I've been to too many weddings where I've gone to the front and I'm like, I'm just checking that there's space for the bridesmaids before I queue them all in. Somebody sat there and I'm like, oh, hi, these are reserved. And they're like, yeah, we're the auntie. They're reserved for us. How do I then go, oh, you didn't make the cut, that's not for you. Let's avoid this whole awkward bit by putting reserved for father of the bride, reserved for bridesmaid Danny, reserved for Hannah, reading, whatever you need to do. If it has a name on, we avoid any awkwardness. And then my final big tip bonus episode part of this is how. How do we make reserve signs? Now, what you're not gonna do is pay for somebody else to make reserve signs. You don't need to. Unless you're having loads of stationery and they're designing all the stuff and blah, 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 that's fine. But it's not essential. These are my reserve signs. I made them on Canva, which if anybody does want all of the downloads for Canva templates, then they're all on my website. So this is on there, but you can print it. So literally made this on Canva, printed it at home on hammered paper or hammered card, Amazon. That means it was that nicer texture. It's a bit of trial and error on what size you want it to be, but that's okay. Once you know the size you want, once you know the font, once you know everything and it's all ready, print them all off, cut them down to size, hole punch the top, tie a bit of ribbon, again, Amazon, or you can just lie them flat on the chair and you are good to go. This is the sort of job that you can be doing months before your wedding. Don't leave this till a week before. You might not know exactly where they're gonna be sitting yet, but you know you're gonna need to reserve the seats for those people. Print them out, have them ready. I hope that all makes sense. I'm gonna recap the 3 biggest tips for reserve signs. Number 1 is you have to have them. They are a non-negotiable part of your ceremony. Number 2 is name those reserve signs. Don't just put reserved. And number 3, they're easy to do. You can make them yourself. My aim is to continue to make videos like this for you so I can explain all of these little tiny elements of a wedding so that you have all of the knowledge you need to plan yours. So let me know what other parts of the wedding you're like, what the hell is this? And I'll make you a whole video on it. Also, if this video is helpful, make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell so that you get told every time I make a new video. Because imagine if this was the one you missed. I've just avoided the whole aisle shuffle for you. You're welcome. Anyway, I will see you next week with even more wedding advice and everything that you didn't know you needed to know.